I'm Tony, and today we're going to be talking about block number 2 from the Retro Gaming Quilt aLong, the Laughing Dog. This is one of my favorite blocks of this quilt. Like, it's just, yeah, I love this. I love this block so much. Now remember, everything that you are about to watch is a few years old. It was whenever I first started doing the online streaming for quilt aLongs. I'd done online streaming for a while, but not for quilt aLongs. So there's going to be lots of interaction with the audience, with chat, with things happening, all sorts of chaos everywhere. But I have tried to edit it down as much as I possibly can so that you get the nitty-gritty and you get to the actual building of the block. So remember, if you have any questions, concerns, anything at all after watching the video, make a comment, send me a message, let me know. Step number 1 is a little different than our step last week, because last week we went right from the beginning and started cutting. This step is a little bit different. So if this block is being made as part of the Retro Gaming Revival Quilt, use the following strips from previous blocks. Please keep a note of this. If you are doing the quilt along with us and you're not making this as a standalone block, this is the important part. So I have my bubble sore from last week and all of my leftover pieces. So we need to take one black strip, okay? So we're going to take our black strip. Now I am going to take the little pieces I also cut in my black strip, because remember, I'm a cheater. I cut things 2 at a time, so I already have a 6.5 inch strip cut. Well, the 4.5, I'm sorry, the 4.5 by 2.5 cut. So I'm going to take that black strip, and I also need the white strip. So whenever I say the solid color strip, I also mean any solid color pieces that you may have pre-cut as well. So we're going to take those aside, and now I can take my bubble sore and set the rest of it aside. So I'm going to set the rest of him right over here out of the way. Fantastic. All right, so let me start organizing this. And next, we are going to cut some strips. So we have white first. Now, I have them in 2 different things. So we need one 2.5 inch strip, but we've already taken it from our bubble sore. We already have this. Because we use this from a previous strip, from a previous block, we do not need to cut that. And then we need 2 1.5 inch strips. Now, again, I cheated a little bit. When I was making the previous quilt in order to do all my pattern testing, I accidentally cut 2 extra 1.5 inch strips. So I'm just going to use those. So let me set that aside. I'm going to put that right there. All right, so black. So for black, we need 1 2.5 inch strip. Oh, I've already pulled it from last week from the bubble sore. We don't have to do that. And now I need 2 1.5. I said 1.5, didn't I? If you're new to my stream, I missay things all the time. We needed 1 2.5 that I already pulled. And now we need 2 1.5. So let me cut these. Now, I actually use what's called a stripology ruler. It is a ruler by Creative Grids. It's an amazing, awesome, fantastic ruler. So there's the close-up. So it's by Creative Grids. There are 2 different stripologies that I like to use. This is the stripology squared, which is a really cool ruler. So what I'm going to do is line that up. What I'm doing is I'm lining it up along the edge, but most importantly here along the fold. So let's go 1.5. So there's my 1.5 inch. Now this has already been squared up. The nice thing about this is you can run it here and square this up along the 0. All right, if I go to the 3, there's nothing there. So I'm going to have to go into my other thing. So that is trash. Let's put my trash pile right there. So I have 1 2.5 inch strip. So let's get another one. All right, we're cutting in half. 1 white strip. Oh, it's already, this one's already cut in half. Fantastic. Okay. Is this one cut in half? Please tell me no. Yes, this one's cut in half. Uh-oh. You know what? I'm going to show you what to do. If you're cutting from fat quarters, you want to cut double the strips of what it tells you. So we're going to pretend this is a fat quarter with the white, and I'll show you what to do. And it's okay. It's perfectly okay. It's almost like it's a fat quarter, and I just have 2 strips that I've cut. So I will show you what to do with that. Let's see, one bright blue. Let's cut one bright blue in half. I mean, because honestly, at this stage really does not make a difference what scissors I use. And one medium brown. So a medium brown and a black. There we go. And then these are our full strips. Okay, now from the 2.5 inch, I'm on the bottom of the first page. From the 2.5 inch strips, we are now going to cut our chunks. So whenever I give lectures at stores, guilds, or conventions, and I talk about my quilting, I talk about how the Quiltoni method of sewing, which is what you're doing right now, how the Quiltoni method is really a combination of chunking and stripping. It is a combination of the two. There is no, it's just a way that I've learned how to efficiently quilt and efficiently do this. So you can put together pixelated images in at a much quicker pace. So what we're doing right now is we're actually cutting our chunks. We've cut our strips for our first part, so now we're going to start chunking. I need 3 4.5 inch rectangles and 2 1.5 inch rectangles. So let me line this up. I'm going to trim that. I need 3 4.5s. So I'm actually going to cut to the 9, because you know me, I like to chunk it. And then 2 1.5s. So at this point, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to take one of these and set it aside so that I have 3. Now with this white, for the Toscana line for the white, I have found it's a lot easier to go ahead and lay it out so you know which side is right side, which side is wrong side. Because remember, with fabric, so here's our black fabric, okay? This is the right side of the fabric. That's the wrong side of the fabric. So you see the difference? The right side is the side with the saturation of color. The wrong side is not. It's the wrong side. So whenever we talk about the right side or wrong side of things, that's what I mean. In this case, there is a right side and wrong side for the white, for the Toscana line. It's just hard to see it, especially with as fast as I move. It's hard to as I'm going. So I want to make sure that I have the right side and the wrong side. I have the right side already set up. Now, all the other colors, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to leave it like it is after I cut it. Using the 1.5 inch strips. So now we're going on to these things. We're going on to the 1.5 inch strips. We want to sew the right sides. Remember what I said, the right side is the side with all of the color saturation. Okay? So right sides together for each of the following combinations. A half white strip. Okay? So let's grab the white strips. There we go. Half white strip to half bright blue strip. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and line it up with the right sides together so that way I don't get confused. Because, I don't know if you know this about me, I get confused easily. So I want to set future Tony up for success. So I'm going to just put those right sides together right now. All right, and then we have a 1 white strip to 1 black strip. Okay, remember, this is where we already have one cut in half. So if you have a fat quarter that you are cutting pieces from in order to make this quilt block, what you want to do at this point is you have 2 short white strips, and then you should have 2 short black strips. Basically treat them as combining 2 half strips. So if you have a whole strip, you want to combine 2 half strips. So here's my black with up. Here is my white down, my black up, and then my white down. There we go. All right, and then next, a half white inch strip to a half medium brown strip. Okay, so my medium brown is here. So I'm going to have my medium brown first because I don't want to have white on white. So my medium brown. And then flip that over so the white is down. Then half bright blue to half black. Okay, so we have a half bright blue left. And here's our black. We've got that. 1 bright blue to 1 medium. Okay, so all I'm going to do in this case is just set that medium right there. And it looks like my bright blue needs a little bit of ironing. So let me get that ironed just to make sure it lays flat, because you do want to iron everything. You may not want to wash it, but you do want to iron it just to make sure it's good. You know what? I'm going to open this up. There we are. All right, and then 1 black to 1 medium brown. Look at this. We have 0 extra half strips. Remember in the first block we had, I think, 1 or 2 extra half strips left over? If you have done this correctly, if there are no half strips left, if you have used everything, chunky quarter, oh, instead of a fat quarter, yes, yes. All right, so now let's sew these. It says, I cut each of these newly combined strips in half. All right, so I'm going to separate this and fold it over like this. So here's my strip. I'm going to take it, fold it like this, and cut it in half. Yes, you get to see the doggies and the kitties. And I'm cutting it in half, just like that. So now I have 2. Now, keep it just like it is, folded in on itself. So you've got that. All right, white and black. Now, remember, I've got 2 whites and blacks. I'm going to make this easy on myself. I'm going to fold this in half again. That way on my mini, now you don't have to do this. If you have the entire long strip, you don't have to cut it in half. You can keep it like it is and just cut it in half one time. You don't have to cut it into 4s. But I have that, as I learned last week, I have that small little ironing board. And it's a lot easier for me if I just do it this way. First off, take the bright blue and medium brown. Okay, we've got our bright blue and our medium brown. We're going to do that one first. We're going to iron them in opposite directions. All right, so in this case, we're ironing this first strip towards the brown. Now remember, I just cut this in quarters. So if you have these in halves, it's perfectly fine. Okay, so that's towards the brown. And now I want to iron it towards the blue. There we go. Now, we're going to do what's called nesting the seams. All right? So how you nest the seams is I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to flip it up over here, and I'm going to use my fingers in order to make sure that these seams right here are nested. So you see how those seams are now in opposite directions? So these 2 seams right here, they're going to nest up perfectly. So you can see, ooh, there we go. There we go. You see how that's lined up perfectly? And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a perfect point every single time. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's do some cutting. So I need, oops, it would help if I had this on correctly. Flipped camera is confusing. So I'm lining up one of my lines along my seam. I'm taking my line, I'm lining it up along this seam right here. So it's a perfectly straight seam. All right, so now let's cut. I need 4 sets. Sets means I'm cutting 2 at a time. 2, dos. So I'm cutting 2 at a time. So I need 4 sets of the 2.5 inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And this is trash. Oops, I didn't cut it deep enough there. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take these and I'm going to open them up. And I'm making 2 different stacks. My one stack is my seams that are going towards the blue, and my other stack is seams that are going towards the brown. And that's going to be easy for laying it out in the next step. Okay? Next, I need to iron this one. So I'm going to iron this towards the brown. So this gets ironed towards the brown. And then the next one gets ironed towards the blue. So this is exactly what I just did. If you did not cut your pieces into quarters, if you only cut them into halves, you don't have to do this extra step because you've already done it. All right, we're going to nest these seams. Let's line this up. All right, and now I need 3 sets of 1.5. Okay, so let's line this up along the seam. So 1, and that's a 1.5. So I'm just double checking to see how many I need. 2, 3. Okay, so they should be, 1.5 inch each. And this is extra, so I'm going to take this and set this on my extras pile. And now I'm going to separate it. And this is just for my own sanity. I just do this until I'm ready to lay everything out. And we'll set that aside. All of this stuff right here, I want to lay it out in a way to where it's going to help me to grab it in a way to then start putting this together. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay out my solid pieces. So I'm laying them out so that it's easy for me to grab it. There we go. And then I'm going to start laying out my cut pieces. So I'm laying them so every single set. So in this case, I've got towards the brown, the larger pieces, towards the brown, smaller pieces, towards the blue, larger pieces, towards the blue, smaller pieces. So I have them all laid out so it's easy to see every piece and take it as I need it. Now, I'm not worried about how close I am getting to the sewing machine because with the sewing machine, I'm not using this until I finish laying all these out. So I'm going to lay all my pieces out first. There we are. We've got that, and then this, and there's all my pieces. All it says is lay all the pieces out. Start with the first row and lay each piece right side up, making sure you pay attention to the direction the seam is facing. So those arrows on the right-hand side, you see how row number 1, the arrow is going this way? It's pointing to the right. That means your seams need to go towards the right. Okay? So towards the right. Row number 2, towards the left. They need to go this way. And whenever I say the way that your seams point, in this case, the seam is pointing towards the black. You see how the seam is going this way? So in this case, if I lay it this way, it's pointing to the right. If I do it that way, it's pointing to the left. So that's all you need to make sure that you're doing as you're laying everything down. No, and you know what? If it's fascinating to you, that is perfectly fine. We are doing block number 2 in our quilt along, exclamation quilt along for more information. So yes, yeah, this is how I do all my quilting. We are doing block number 2, which is the hunting dog, inspired by Duck Hunt. All right, I'm weird. I like to do my rows opposite. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up, okay? So let me put this down a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to work on my bottom row first. So I'm doing row number 9. So I'm working backwards. I'm weird. That's just the way I like to do it. All right, so row number 9. I have this piece right here. Let's move my iron over. I've got that piece right there. And then a brown and blue with the brown up. Now, my seam is going towards the blue. Remember how I said we have to nest those seams? We have to make sure those seams are alternating in order to all line up. In this case, my seam's going towards the blue. So my next one, I need to go up towards the brown. Okay? And then down towards the blue. Now, this one's a little confusing because I've got a bunch. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total of these. 1, 2, 3. That's towards the blue, yes. 4, 5. Okay? The next one, it's a combo. So it's one of my horizontal ones. I'm going to take my solid piece down there, and my top piece is a brown and black combined. The arrow's going to the right. So I'm going to make sure that it's pointing towards the black. So I have a brown and black piece. The seam is pointing towards the black. My arrow's to the right, so my seam points to the right. Now, you notice how I automatically just started grouping these up. So I like to put my pieces down in groups of 2. Good morning, Jose. So I'm grouping them in groups of 2. Oh, no, I just saw Nikki pointed that out. So whenever I'm grouping them up, I'm saving myself a step for whenever I combine them and pin them in order for sewing. So whenever I'm lining them up, I'm doing in those groups of 2 to make sure I've got it. So now this is going down. So this seam is going to go up. So I have to make sure the next one goes down. So towards the blue and towards the brown. Now, I do not want to combine these 2 together because this one's going to get combined to this after it's sewn because it's a horizontal one. So that's in our next step on the 3rd page. So I'm just going to leave it like it is. And then the last piece will then get grouped up with this one right here. And that's row 9. Our first vertical piece, where you have 2 that are combined together, like this for a 2 1/2, 2 1/2. All right, in this case, our arrow is pointing to the right for row 5. So it's a blue and white piece, so I need to make sure it's going towards the white. Oh, hey, look, I already grabbed it, the one towards the white. So this one is going towards the white already, so I can lay that down. You should have these 3 pieces left. If you're doing this along with me, you should have 1, 2, 3 pieces left. Okay? If you have these pieces left, you've done it correctly. So I'm going to take these 3 pieces, and I'm going to set them aside over in my little area. All right, so we have 3 horizontal pieces, row 2, row 6, and row 9. Okay? So 2, 2, 6, and 9. 8, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9. So we have those. All right? So row 2. If I'm going to do sign language, I'm going to make sure I do it right. Row 2. Horizontal piece. Now, in this case, there are no seams on either side. So I can just take this and flip the bottom up, which is the easiest. and I'm going to put a pin in the center. I'm going to line this up so my two edges are lined up nicely. I'm going to put a pin in the center, and then I'm going to put pin on either sides. There we go. So I've got that horizontal piece. Row 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right here. Now, in this case, the seams on either side of 6 are pointing down. Okay? So this one right here, I need to point up. So what I'm going to do is take the bottom, turn it up, but then turn this over. All right? So that in this case, now my white and my black is on the top. And then whenever I sew and iron it, my seam is going to be pointing this way. So it's going to be pointing up. All right, let's pin this in place. Our last horizontal piece is row number 9. So all the way at the bottom, right here. We're going to take this one. Now, this is another one where the seams on either side are both facing down. So we're going to take this. I'm going to take the bottom, flip it up, and then turn it over. So if you want the seam to go up, if you want the seam to point that way, turn the piece over after taking the bottom and flipping it up over the top. If you want it to go down, just flip it up. Just take that bottom piece and flip it up. It's perfectly fine. All right, so we have our 3 horizontal blocks. Let's do some sewing. Let's do some sewing. So we're going to sew these horizontal blocks. Row number 9, the arrows are pointing to the right. So because they're going, this is the trick that I use to remember. To the right arrow means I take the right piece, I'm going to flip it over the left piece, and then pin it in place. Okay? So arrow to the right means I'm picking up the right piece, flipping it over the left, and pinning it in place. So in this case, right over left, pinning it in place. Now, I'm making sure that these seams nest up. I'm taking my finger, and I'm making sure that these two seams are butting up right against each other. That takes a little bit of practice in order to make sure that you've got it right. So you may take a little longer doing that in order to make sure that they line. So in this case, right over left, making sure those seams are lined up, and pinning it in place. Now, you need to put a pin in where that seam is. You don't have to put a pin on the right and the left. I do, just because I'm a little anal retentive with things. I really want to make sure that that's done correctly. So I put pins everywhere. I firmly believe you can never have too many pins. That's just what I do. Okay? Oh, excuse me, man. Oh, allergies. Okay, right over left, and pinning it in place. Now, in this case, there's no seam on the top, but I'm still going to put a pin in the center where that seam is. And that's going to make sure that that seam, so I have a pin right there, it's going to make sure that that seam that's on the opposite side is not going to catch and flip and cause issues whenever I'm sewing. All right, and let's do this. We're going to pin, we're going to pin. All right, ready for row 8. Row number 8. We got 8. 8. The arrow is pointing to the left. Okay, we're pointing to the left. So I'm going to take my left piece, flip it over the right piece. Because remember, if it's pointing to the left, left over right. And then pin it in place. And what this does is it makes sure that whenever you sew and then iron it, you don't have to worry about making sure you're ironing it the correct direction. You're already setting yourself up for success by laying it out the correct way. All right? So left over right and pinning in place. So I'm reaching it, and I'm taking it. So I will show you the ironing and everything else at the next step, okay? So I just wanted to show you what you can't see in there. We have our rows, right? So we have them sewn, we have them laid out. What I'm going to do is one row at a time, I'm going to take them and I'm going to lay them out. Just like this. Oh, my iron went to sleep. I've got to wake it up. And then all I did was I laid them straight out. I didn't turn any of them. I didn't do any of that. I just laid it straight out. So I'm going to iron them this way. If you've done this correctly and you haven't flipped anything as you've been working on it, you should be ironing them in the correct direction so that it's going to save you that extra step of laying it out and seeing which way you should be ironing it. There we go. It is green. Look at those perfect points. Look at those perfect points. As long as you nest those seams, you should get those perfect points every time. All right. Now, I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So I'm going to pick them up in the opposite direction that I laid them out. Now, here's the trick. This goes to the right. So my seams need to point to the right because that's the way that the arrow goes. Good. Hello, Zorania. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay it out. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And I'm going to look to make sure, does everything line up? Yep, everything lines up. Everything looks good. Fantastic. Now let's pin it. All right, so in this case, seams to the right. So I'm still picking up that right piece over the left piece and pinning it into place. In this case, this has 3 pieces, okay? 1, 2, 3 pieces. I'm going to take this left piece, flip it over the right, pin it in place, and then I'm going to flip the right piece over the left piece. So I'm actually going to pin all 3 pieces at the same time, making sure we nest these seams. There we go. And that row is ready. All right, let's do this one. Now, most of these, you're going to have 2 or 3 pieces, and you're going to either have 1 seam or do what I just did. And so pin 3 pieces at once. So here's another 3 one. Seams go to the left. And as I'm laying out, I'm double checking to make sure everything is correct. I'm making sure everything looks good. Now in this case, when I go left over right, you see how much longer this piece is than that piece? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay it, I'm going to fold, and fold again. So that I can see this open piece over here, so I can take this piece and flip it over there. So I'm going to group them up. So in this case, I'm going to take these 2, group them together. These 2, group together. These 2. Now, this has 1 on both sides and then 1 on top. I'm actually going to take the one on both sides and put it on the one on top. Same thing here. So I've grouped them all together with a single little one by itself. So these are all groups of 2, because remember, I like to group them because that's what I'm sewing together. So let's go ahead and sew these. Now this is my favorite part of the quilt. This is when everything starts to come together. So this is my absolute favorite part of the quilt. Nope, that's a car. I thought it was thunder for a second. All right, so at this point, what I'm doing is I'm finding all of the seams. So I'm finding, in this case right here, I have 2 seams that line up. I make sure they nest. I put a pin in there. And then I go back and put pins in the rest of the seams. Because we don't want this moving. Those seams that line up are the most important ones. But we want to make sure that none of the other seams move. So remember, if there's a seam on the bottom, I still put a pin in it. And that's so the seam doesn't flip open and have any issues. There we go. See, this is the fun part. I really, really love this part. There it is. There is our laughing dog. And that's the laughing dog. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, TikTok, all the things, all the things. And don't forget about Twitch. I stream live both on Twitch and YouTube, so feel free to pop on by and say hi.